where day she's there, I say, please share my umbrella. Bus stop, bus go, she stays, love grows under my umbrella.
This is a rare and special opportunity for me to visit with somebody who has played a very important role in my career, very early on in my consulting journey, that resulted in this little handbook called the Book of Wow. And it is just a part of it. But Dana Klein joins me today. Hi, Dana. Good to have you.
Joseph, seeing all your videos and all your podcasts, it's truly an honor to be among some very, very talented people that you've had over the years. So thank you very much. And I really appreciate the time we'll share together.
So let's go way back. I was working for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company and doing a book about them. And shortly thereafter, this guy named Dana Klein reaches out to me and says, we're doing some innovative cutting edge things at what was then called Janus Funds, I think, maybe Janus Capital. But in any regard, it was later named Janus Henderson. But at that time it was Janus, and you reached out to me. You were saying, I'm part of this thing called Janus Labs, and we're doing this innovative cutting edge stuff. And I thought, well, what's going on here? And I am so glad that we took the time to get to know each other and then the work that we did through those years. So let's talk a little bit about you and Janus Labs and kind of how that propels your thought leadership today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you just sort of brought it to yet again another level. But here was the general premise. We were a relatively kind of a B2B sales organization. Janus had a whole bunch of mutual funds, and we distributed them or sold them through financial advisors. So they're the buyer, not necessarily customer. Janus had been more direct to folks like you, Jeff. In fact, I think you told me you own the Janus funds, but
I still do. I'm still a Janus investor. Yeah.
There you go. But at the time, so how do we get those folks to want to do business with us when for the previous 20 years, Janus had been in the business of saying, don't go to a financial advisor, bring us your money and we'll take care of you. And then the world shifted after 2000, and so we won't get into that. But what we decided was you can't just walk in and say, here, now we're different. We had to prove ourselves. And I believe that the way to do that is you start by really understanding what is it we can do to help you, not because we have, yet again, the latest, greatest fund investment, but actually we want to help you with your practice. And I've been a huge believer of that salespeople tend to do, we used to say, you got to do what's right, not what's easy. What's easy is, let me tell you about the latest and greatest. Let me start by trying to help you with your business. So we had a variety of programs. And one day I saw a presentation by a gentleman from the Ritz-Carlton Company, to cut to Joseph. And he did this fabulous presentation. Here's how Ritz-Carlton treats its customers. And it was fabulous. I thought, wow, this is great. Let me see if we couldn't work with Ritz-Carlton. We would, let's say, license their material. They have a whole training place in, I think it used to be in Bethesda, Maryland. I don't know if they still do. I assume they do, part of Marriott. And I called them up. I had a conversation with the guy that was at the meeting, and then he had me speak to the head of their corporate training program. And we had a nice conversation, and not 5 minutes into it, we said, here's what we'd like to do, license your content and teach people the Ritz-Carlton method. And the answer was, no, we don't do that. Why? Well, to make a long story short, if you get it wrong in any way, shape, or form, that you could damage our brand. So we have a policy, we just won't do this. Okay? It was a quick conversation. And I turned to my staff at the time and I said, well, that's not a very Ritz-Carlton way of doing things, but all right, we understand. Then lo and behold, I was at a Ritz-Carlton not 3 or 4 months later at like a spring break, and there, right by the cash register, was this book, which I have. You have it behind you, so I don't even need to hold it.
I have it prominently available.
New gold standard.
Yeah, here it is.
By this guy, Joseph Michelli. And for 1995. I probably paid the full price. I bought this book and I basically had the story and everything they did. And I thought, well, okay, let me just reach out to this guy, Joseph Michelli. And it was a great relationship because what you taught me, and I had years before that, I had, and I am somewhat of a follower of Dr. Robert Cialdini, who sort of wrote the book Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion in the late 80s. He's, sent millions of copies. But the point is, one of the key fundamental principles that he came up with is reciprocity. I do for you, and you'll have a sense of obligation to me. And that is exactly what Ritz Carlton does in so many forms. Um, and that's what we worked on. And we
And just to kind of put a point on it, you did an incredible job because as you applied this, now think about this, they were a B2C company for the most part at Janus, and you were trying to develop relationships in the B2B2C because the world had shifted from a direct relationship and you needed to go through the financial advisors really to have your products considered in the suite of options for customers or clients as they would refer to them. And lo and behold, you got in the door. And this was really challenging because for all those years that you were going direct to clients, you were ignoring those financial advisors for all practical intents and purposes. And now suddenly you're coming to them and saying, we want to partner with you. And they, in many cases, I think early on, were saying, no way, see the hand, right? But because you created value by figuring out ways to help those advisors wow their clients. I mean, that's really the fundamental issue. And, in the context of the book, The Ritz-Carlton, we talk about delivering wow as a business principle. You figured out how to apply that specifically so that advisors could do that with their clients. And this was, I think, pretty revolutionary at the time, and it was extremely helpful. You helped advisors appreciate the risks that they had if they didn't go the extra mile in creating relationships. And I think that's where we're going to spend our time today, because I think the key insight that you bring and that led you to wherever you went here is that it is about relationship value over transactional value. And so I want to put that back to you because I know that's it's on your heart these days. It's what you help leaders and businesses do on a day in, day out basis. So maybe we can start there. We can pull threads back in through reciprocity and Cialdini and all those other things. But talk to me a little bit about that value proposition of relationships.
You hit it right on the head. I probably couldn't have said it any better. What I learned from from doing the things at Janus, but also in working with folks like yourself, was that the products that we were selling, I would much to the dismay of a lot of people around the office, they're commodities. They're not quite salt. You tell me the difference between Morton and Diamond Crystal, and of course my wife probably can. She's a little better cook than I am, but the reality is that it's still salt, right? And so, how do you, when you're offering these commodity-like products, how do you differentiate yourself? And it absolutely starts, and it ultimately creates a durable relationship when you start by trying to create that valuable relationship. And so we used to say in the case of parity, right? Our salt is like your salt, or our mutual fund is like other mutual funds. But in the case of parity, we should win because we're doing everything we can to help. That was our internal mantra. We didn't walk around saying that to people. But I think that is exactly the point, that if you are, as a salesperson or a business development person, or frankly, in any role, I mean, you could be dealing with, getting your kids to eat broccoli, you have to think about, like, how do I move this relationship forward? And it really starts with that. Once you develop the relationship, then yeah, you can get into, how competent are you really? What is the difference between my product and all the other products? What's the difference between a Ritz-Carlton hotel and a Four Seasons or whatever? And then once you develop that sort of sense of, credibility and authority, now you can start to ask for the order, if you will, try to motivate people to saying yes. But it all starts, and the fundamentals, the blocking and tackling, really starts with understanding how do you develop that relationship. And what the Art of Wow did for me was it really showed me how you can really do that, that you could create, these moments of impact that made all the difference. And we developed, because of the work that you had done from, other clients and things that you taught us, it really is a process that, you don't just, here, let me just give you, how about better tickets to the ball game? Oh, you want to sit courtside at, the next pro ball, basketball game, or you're going to go to the Final Four is coming up, it really isn't about that, because that's
Particularly if I am not into basketball, right? Like that's
exactly,
the other
you know,
irony of
oh,
some of these things.
thank you.
We create these impersonally elevated experiences, right? That's the whole point, I think, of what you get at in your
Yeah,
approach.
and,
One other
and
thing I would really say that I think you guys were genius at, and particularly this comes from you largely, you can't do this at scale for everybody. You can't create wow at the ultimate sense of wow, that like throw yourself under a bus for somebody kind of wow that we often think about. You can do that once normally, then you're done with throwing yourself under a bus. You really were very careful about understanding how to create small wows and wows relevant to the reciprocity of the relationship. So if I can bring a lot of wealth for you to manage, you might want to be creating a larger wow for me, a more personalized wow, if you will. Less you customize and down to this sort of generic but elevated level of wow. And I just think that was so insightful, and I think it's why I am a big fan of yours and why I'm encouraging this podcast, because I think there are a lot of people who need to get your insights on that, or just how do you contextualize this stuff so that it's manageable.
yeah, and there were two elements to the whole thing. One was, well, how do you wow somebody, right? Like, is it personal, right? Is it something they would really care about? And it can be something relatively small, but it's personal to me. Is it surprising? You can't just show up, with flowers, because that's what everybody used to say. No financial advisor, that was the market we were dealing with, ever needs to buy a golf ball again, because there are legions of people with golf balls with their company name on them. They'll give you a golf ball, right? But that's so. What's so surprising about that? What's so unique? But what is it that you can do that's unique? Um, and then finally, how do you sort of make it something that becomes a little bit more? So you do that, but then to your point, Joseph, you're right. You cannot do it for everybody. So you really have to think about, what does my customer base look like? Who are my customers? And it could be everything from, and we're dealing with people that are relatively higher net worth as far as their customers are concerned. But there are levels. I see your Mercedes book in the back. There are people that drive a Mercedes, and there are others that drive a Ford. So what is it? But you need to kind of figure that out. Is this a customer that fits at a wider tier? And there's a lot of things that you can do that are relatively unique, but for a broader set. So they can't be quite so custom. And then you can move it up a little bit. We had like 4 different tiers till ultimately you find the people that are that sort of, for the financial advisor, the target rich environment. But it would work in almost every organization. When you think about where you think about business development, where are the real opportunities, and you stratify it. And you're right, there are some things that are going to be more custom for certain people. But there are others that can be very, very simple. I'll give you a quick story that happened to me. I used to stay, because I was going to Janice regularly. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I would travel out pretty frequently. And so we had a special there was a hotel that literally connected to the door to the building. It was two buildings that were connected.
And this is in Denver, by the way, for those of
Yeah,
you.
this was in Cherry Creek, the JW Marriott. And I will say, this is what you want out of that client, right? So I would go to the JW. They had a special room rate because of volume, whatever. But Marriott, in its infinite wisdom along the way, decided to change. They were competing with, I don't know, Heavenly Bed from Weston at the time. Of course, now they own them. But they changed their whole pillows around. So they had these little pillows. They were like a throw pillow on your couch. And instead of having, 2 big king size pillows, you got like 5 little ones. And I remember waking up and my neck hurt because my head was off the pillow. And so I got a survey from Marriott. This happens if you travel frequently. and I basically ding the room. Everything else is great, wonderful hotel, but the room, nah, 2, right? So I immediately, within a day, get an email from the GM saying, "What can we do? What have we done?" I said, "Well, there's really nothing you can do. There's somebody back in the home office that said, you're going to use these pillows. We'll send them to you." And I said, "Well, either one of 2 things. One, they never stay at Marriott's, or 2, their head is the size of a pin." So we had a good laugh out of that. And we went and he bought me a drink at the bar, and we had some good conversations. We're frankly still very good friends. But to get to the chase, the next time I showed up in my room were 2 king size pillows with my name embroidered on them. Now,
Wow.
and by the way, what did that cost? It probably went to like, by the way, they weren't even down pillows, so they were foam. So they didn't spend a ton of money or anything. They went across the street. There was a mall where they had a guy that could, we can embroider your hat, whatever. He had to embroider a couple pillowcases, and there it was. But I walked into my room. No one said anything. There were a couple Snickers. I realized later when I checked in. "Here's your room key, Mr. Klein." Tim, and there they were on my bed
Yeah.
with my name,
Yeah.
and that
And lifetime
was
value
a
investment, that
wow
was,
moment.
yeah, and talk about lifetime value coming out of that investment. Here you
And
are talking about it today. I know that's been more than a week or 2 ago. So
yeah,
it's been a long-standing story for you, right? It's been one of those things you want to share. And that's the part, that's the other element we often talk about in the context of wow, is that it is something people want to share. It's easily shareable. You can narrate that story with all of us following it. Like we get it, right? It connects with our own
it's
humanity.
simple.
So
And,
yeah,
and what it created was a durable relationship. I'm sitting here saying, "Hey, if you have to go to Denver,
yeah.
go to the Cherry Creek Marriott. It's relatively close to downtown. It's a great little hotel, blah, blah, blah." Whatever. The point is, I am still a fan. I'm a fan of that guy who's a GM. He's moved on to other places. Wherever he is, this is the guy you want to see. Danny
So
Stern, I
let's
still love you.
go ahead. You say his name
So,
again. I think I overstepped you on that. What was his name
okay.
again?
I was going to say, Danny Stern, I still love you.
All right.
We follow each other on Facebook and whatever. But the
Let me
point is,
pull this into a more organically broad conversation
well,
because
and
that's a
that's
great
and that's
example.
what I want to get to now. So here's the point, right? Okay, so I have this relationship with this hotel. So what? It's not the only hotel. In fact, my wife used to say, "Well, if you go to another Marriott, what do? Ship the pillows?" Which of course they don't. But what it did for our company at the time is it created what I call durable relationships. And that really manifested itself. And I still have people telling me about it. And by the way, we're talking about, in 2007 and 2008, for those who may or may not remember, it was a horrible time to be invested in the market. And the one thing, because of the work that we did at Janus Labs, it gave people were willing to give us the benefit of the doubt. And that made a big difference to the firm and to all, of course, the salespeople across the entire organization. Because instead of seeing assets run out the door to go to whatever, cash or just competitors, they actually stayed. And that is the key, that when you have a product that's just like a lot of others, if I have a durable relationship with you, I have a strong relationship, you're going to give me the benefit of the doubt. Now, it doesn't last forever. I get that. There's a lot to it, but it sure helps.
Well,
And in
again,
the
I
long run,
remember for all the
people will
people who
come
say this
back
is
faster.
for all the people who say this is soft, there was solid data at Janus that looked at if you could keep that durable relationship so people gave you just a little bit longer, that often the markets would correct themselves and you would then be in for the longer, way longer term, not just a temporarily longer term. If you could just get over that hump with a trust, you frequently had a long run ramp thereafter. So let me take it
Yeah.
to now. You've then, from all that time, you stayed in financial services. You've helped other brands build around these kinds of concepts. You've helped advisors in many settings, but you've also branched out. You've gone to the Wharton School, learned negotiation skills, been certified in that at Wharton, if I remember correctly. You've taken the time with Bob Cialdini, who's just an incredible guy who I've known as a result of a colleague of mine who was a professor of mine who was a colleague of his. And then you've put all this together, kind of Cialdini influence concepts, negotiation concepts, relationship building, enduring relationship building, and have now launched into your own world and been doing this consultative function as well as workshops. So let's talk a little bit about those offerings in the context of building durable relationships or helping your clients do that. Because again, at Janus Labs, the real journey was helping businesses do that for their clients. So maybe you can talk about that in the time that we have today.
Yeah. And, here's basically, so I have this little group I call Klein Strategies. Where that came from, I don't know. It wasn't the most creative title, but it's good enough. But the idea is I want to empower professionals across any industry or any business with the skills to negotiate and persuade, to secure better deals, to strengthen their relationships, build these durable relationships, and then be able to confidently navigate high pressure conversations. Sometimes it's not just about, the salesman running around the world trying to, sell their whatever the company's wears. It could be, I work with one company, we're talking to the accounting department. Why? Because the guys in accounting had this great software package, but they couldn't push it up the food chain because the owners or the senior execs are like, resource constrained, prove it, right? And those guys are not as good at sort of making their case. And that's what we're trying to do, is help people make their case for good reasons, very ethical reasons. I can get into the whole Cialdini thing and working with another professor, Richard Shell at Wharton. But even Shell in his original book, Bargaining for Advantage, and what you learn at Wharton is based on a lot of those same principles. Just like the art of wow. The art of wow is essentially the concept that you psychologists will call reciprocity, right? I do for you, and you have a sense of obligation, and that's what we basically did. And reciprocity goes a long way to very powerfully building that relationship, because that's where everything starts. It can't just be, hi, how do you do? Let me tell you about my latest product. And that is where a lot of people fall down. Even in the accounting department, where it's like, okay, here's our deck with all the things that this software is going to do, but they miss maybe what's the key concern that the senior execs have. How do you really figure all those things out? That's part of it. One of the things we learned, we talked about with Art of Wow, what's meaningful to me? I don't play golf. You can give me all the golf balls in the world. I have boxes of golf balls. I don't know what to do with them other than give them to other people. But you find the right pillows when I'm sleeping in your hotel, and I love you forever. And those are the things that are meaningful, that really matter. And that's what we really tried to learn. And that's basically what the book was really all about. We just asked people, what have you done? Right? And they all came back with fabulous stories of things that people have done. In this case, mostly financial advisors. That was the audience, to help them. I mean, other programs that we built one. We originally called it Ironman Advisor because Janus sponsored Ironmans. But it really was about, not just, it was like mind, body, spirit. Right? We worked with a group called Human Performance Institute, and we had people going through a program that wasn't just about, get on the treadmill every day or whatever, but it was really about understanding physiology and where that comes from, along with how do you deal with storms? What are the difficult periods in your life, and how do you deal with them because of the systems that they put in place? Doctors Lair and Gropel, who are long retired, um, but the principles are the same, and there are plenty of people that will be happy to help you with that. These are all the things that make a big difference for individuals. So that's really what I'm trying to do. And my focus right now is really on those sort of, how can I create some of those art of wow moments for organizations? How can I show them how to do it? And then once you move to that, how do you set yourself up? How do you, if you're going to go into a negotiation, fine. What are the basic 4 simple principles of a negotiation? If you're just developing a client, what are the things that you really need to do? How much, the one thing I learned, particularly Joseph, in the Art of Wow, and from you, was how much time you have to spend to really understand what matters to the other person. Because if I came in
This
and said, "Oh,
time and
let's do a
listening, right?
negotiation program," I got nothing to negotiate, So now what, right? So it's really understanding what matters,
It's
and then
interesting.
you
One of
move
my
forward.
favorite negotiations. I went to a meeting with a group and said, "Here, let me put on the table all the things that matter to us, and I want to really hear all the things that matter to you. And now we can talk." It was like,
Exactly.
whoa, that was really unbelievable because it seemed like instead of all that gamesmanship where you're trying to hide your powder, see how much you can get from the other person surreptitiously. This was a really above the board negotiation. It felt pretty remarkable. All right, let me
Yeah,
kind of set the stage here. At the risk that I'm going to violate what you said the Ritz-Carlton was unwilling to do, namely that I run the risk of endorsing you, and then I run risk with that, right? And so I don't endorse a lot of people, and I understand why the Ritz-Carlton took its position, but I will endorse you 100%, and I will because of a couple of million things beyond our own working relationship and seeing you do what you do and watching this phenomenal thing that you did at Janus. I've also known you to be an insatiably curious and an amazing reader, and people should get that sense from this conversation today. It is what caused you to read yourself into my life, if you will. It's what I watch you do constantly, and I think organizations need wise people to come to them and help inspire their people, help them learn skills and tools to have a good business case advocated for in an organization for the betterment of the organization. So unreservedly, I share
wow,
endorsement for what
thank
you're
you.
doing. So please make sure that people can understand how they can get a hold of you. I'll put it in the show notes. It's not like it's
Yep.
a goner here if you don't catch it in the audio or visual version of this. But go ahead and please let people know how they can get a hold of you, what your process is once they engage you to determine if there's a fit for you and them.
Absolutely. Couple things. Certainly, you have my web address. It's Dana at klein-strategies.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn at Joseph's, I would say, persuading. I've started a newsletter. I just put it out for the first time today, along with doing regular posts on LinkedIn. I didn't realize that a newsletter is better. So connect with me, and you'll get my newsletter every week when it comes out. I have some great little stories. I'm a big believer that if I can show you an example, you're more likely to connect with it. Just like I learned from all the stories in the Ritz Carlton, if I need to know where the bathroom is, they will take me by the hand. I also learned that everybody there has, at least back then when you wrote the book, a $2,000 budget to help me with any problem that I could possibly have, which I never took advantage of, but I wish I had known when I first started going there. Same thing with Starbucks. I can go to the Starbucks and stay there all day and meet people. And, these are all the things I love. And I have to say, I've read every one of your books, even Prescriptions for Excellence, which I had to kind of saw through a little bit because it didn't really mean a lot to me.
Yeah, it was really healthcare
Getting
heavy.
doctors to wash their hands. But I did start paying attention that every time my doc came in,
See, there's a
you know,
lesson in books that seem in for.
this was
All right,
before COVID.
let me make it clear. So you're going to reach out to you. You're going to, they can follow you on LinkedIn. Obviously, they can go to your
Right.
website, and then just reach out to you, explore the possibility of how you might help them with negotiation skills for their team members, how you might help them understand some of these core principles of relationship building to develop enduring relationships, whether that's reciprocity or other really powerful social psychology principles from Dr. Cialdini, plus all of your own stuff that you've collected, like the Art of Wow through the years.
When I was growing up, my dad used to say, he was an engineer, so he was the furthest thing from me. But he used to say that wisdom is the combination of knowledge and experience. And it's bringing those experiences in. It's one thing to read the book because I could read your book on Ritz Carlton, but what I learned was that's not the answer. I can't sit there and go, well, all right, we're going to give everybody $2,000 to fix problems, right? It's really spending the time with the person that's been there and done that and really understands how you apply that. And that takes some extra effort. You can't just read the book, you got to go do it.
Well, and with that in
Those are
mind,
the
you
things
will
that I
impart
learned.
wisdom. You will impart knowledge and experience. You will impart wisdom. I encourage people to reach out to Dana Klein. That's the time we have today. I am honored to have had this time with you, my friend, and continue great success in changing the world for the better.
Joseph, thank you so very much. Again, I am just honored to be here.